One man never fired a gun, never saw the Congo with his own eyes, and by the time he was finished, 10 million people were gone. He called it charity. He called himself a humanitarian. The world believed him for 20 years. This is the story of the king who turned a country into a machine and ran it on human hands. You are standing in a forest, holding a basket of rubber, and it is not heavy enough. You know what that means. You have seen what happens to the men whose baskets are too light. The soldiers are already walking toward your village, and the law of this place is simple. Bring the quota, or someone you love pays for what you could not carry. This is the Congo. The year is 1900, and the man who owns your life has never once set foot on this soil and never will. His name is Leopold II, King of the Belgians. He sits in a palace in Brussels, more than 4,000 miles away, a tall man with a long white beard who loves maps and money and being seen as a humanitarian. He calls this place the Congo Free State. He tells the world it is a charity, a mission to civilize, to end slavery, to bring light to the heart of Africa. He has fooled almost everyone. And in the 23 years that he holds this land as his personal property, the population of the Congo will fall by an estimated 10 million people. Not a war, not a plague that nature sent, a business. How does one man who never visits, who never fires a shot, who is praised in the great halls of Europe as a friend to Africa, preside over the deaths of millions? To understand it, you have to go back to the maps. In the 1870s and 1880s, the powers of Europe were carving Africa into pieces, and Leopold wanted his share. Belgium was a small country with no great colony, and its king was a man of enormous ambition and enormous greed. He could not simply seize the Congo as a nation, so he did something stranger. He claimed it as a man. He funded expeditions, signed treaties with local chiefs who could not read them, and in 1885, at the Berlin Conference where Europe divided a continent it barely understood, the great powers recognized his claim. The Congo Free State was born. It was nearly 80 times the size of Belgium, and it belonged not to Belgium but to Leopold personally. At first he hunted ivory, but it was a different substance that turned the Congo into a charnel house: rubber. In 1888, a Scotsman patented the pneumatic tyre. Within a few years the world went mad for rubber. Bicycles, then automobiles, then the wiring and tubing of the modern industrial age, all of it hungry for rubber, and the Congo's forests were full of wild rubber vines. Leopold had stumbled onto one of the most profitable resources on earth, and he intended to extract every drop of it. The problem was that gathering wild rubber was brutal, slow, dangerous work that no free person would do for nothing. So Leopold made sure they were not free. His instrument was an army called the Force Publique, tens of thousands of African soldiers, commanded by European officers, scattered across the territory in fortified posts. Their job was not to protect the people. Their job was to make the people produce. Each village was given a rubber quota, impossible amounts, raised higher whenever they were met. And to guarantee the men went into the forest, the soldiers took what mattered most. They took the women. Across the Congo, the Force Publique would march into a village, seize the wives, the mothers, the daughters, and hold them hostage in stockades. The men were told the price of their freedom: bring the rubber, or they will not come back. So you go into the forest, you climb, you bleed, you strip the vines and let the sap dry on your skin and tear it off in clots, and you carry your basket back and you pray it is heavy enough. Sometimes the hostages were ransomed. Often they starved in the stockades first. The death toll among the hostages alone was staggering. And then there was the chicotte. It was a whip cut from sun-dried hippopotamus hide, twisted into a hard spiral edge that cut like a blade. 100 lashes was a common punishment, and 100 lashes could kill. Men, women, children were flogged for empty baskets, for slowness, for being suspected of slowness. But the chicotte was not the symbol that would brand this place in the memory of the world. That symbol was the hand. The European officers issued cartridges to their soldiers, and cartridges cost money, and Leopold's accountants did not want them wasted on hunting or sold. So a rule was made. For every bullet a soldier fired, he had to bring back proof that it had killed an enemy of the state. He had to bring back a human hand, a right hand, smoked over a fire to preserve it for the journey back to the post. Think about what that rule actually created. A soldier who missed his shot or used a cartridge to hunt an animal for food still had to account for the bullet. So he took a hand from someone living. Baskets of severed hands were brought to the officers and counted like coins. Hands taken from the dead, hands taken from the dying, hands taken from children. There are accounts of villages where the survivors were left with stumps, of soldiers who carried the smoked hands strung on a line. The hand became the currency of a system that ran on terror. Who could have stopped it, and why did it take so long for anyone to try? The first man to raise his voice was not European. In 1890, an African-American journalist and historian named George Washington Williams travelled to the Congo expecting to find the noble enterprise Leopold advertised. What he found horrified him. He wrote an open letter to the king, a document that named the forced labour, the cruelty, the lies, and in it he used a phrase that almost no one used then. He called what was happening in the Congo a crime against humanity. He was ignored, dismissed, and he died the next year. But the seed was planted. Then came the shipping clerk. His name was Edmund Dean Morel, and he worked for a Liverpool shipping company that handled the Congo trade. Morel was no revolutionary. He was a man who looked at numbers, and the numbers did not add up. He watched the ships come into the docks from the Congo loaded with a fortune in rubber and ivory. Then he watched the ships go back out, and what went back to the Congo was not payment, it was not trade goods, it was guns, ammunition, chains, soldiers. Morel realised, standing on a wet dock with a ledger in his hand, that nothing was being exchanged for the rubber. If nothing was being paid, then the rubber was not being bought. It was being taken. And a system that takes everything and gives back only weapons has only one name. It was slavery on an industrial scale, and Morel could prove it with arithmetic. Morel gave up his career and became one of the most relentless investigative journalists in history. He founded the Congo Reform Association. He gathered testimony, published photographs, and turned Leopold's private kingdom into an international scandal. And then the evidence became undeniable. In 1903, the British government sent its consul, Roger Casement, to travel through the Congo and report what he saw. Casement spent months on the rivers, in the villages, writing down names, counting the missing, listening to survivors describe the stockades and the soldiers and the hands. His report, published in 1904, was meticulous, restrained, and devastating. It did not need to shout. It simply recorded, in the cold language of a diplomat, the testimony of people who had watched their families destroyed for the sake of a quota. The missionaries added the final weight. A British missionary named Alice Seeley Harris photographed what the regime tried to hide. One photograph travelled around the world. It showed a man named Nsala sitting on a porch, staring at a small severed hand and foot laid out on the ground in front of him. They belonged to his 5-year-old daughter. The Force Publique had come because his village had failed its rubber quota, and they had killed and mutilated his child. The camera did what statistics could not. It made the number into a face. So how many died? The honest answer is that no one counted, and no one ever will. There was no census of the Congo before Leopold, and the regime had every reason to hide the bodies. But historians studying the collapse of the population, the mass killings, the starvation, the exhaustion, the diseases that swept through a people too broken to resist them, and the birth rate that cratered as families were torn apart, have estimated that the population may have fallen by around 10 million in the years of Leopold's rule. Some estimates are lower, some are higher. The exact figure is lost forever. But whether it was 8 million or 13, the scale is almost impossible to hold in the mind. An entire civilization hollowed out so that a king on another continent could grow rich. And he did grow rich. The money flowed back to Brussels, and Leopold spent it on himself and on his country. Grand arches, galleries, a great museum to display the treasures and the civilizing mission of the Congo. Monuments rose across Belgium, built on a foundation that the public was told was charity. For most of his reign, Leopold was celebrated as a visionary humanitarian, but the truth caught up with him. The reports, the photographs, the relentless campaigning, the testimony of men like Williams and Morel and Casement finally forced the issue. The pressure became unbearable. In 1908, the Belgian government took the Congo away from its own king and made it an official colony of the state. Leopold never apologized. Before he handed it over, he burned the archives of the Congo Free State, feeding years of records into the furnaces so the full accounting could never be made. He said the Congo was his, and what he had done in it was no one's business. He died in 1909. As his funeral procession moved through the streets of Brussels, the crowd booed. The forests grew back over the worst of it. The hands were never counted. The museum he built still stands. And for a long time, much of the world simply forgot, because the man who did it never raised a weapon, never saw a body, never heard a scream. He did it all from a palace, with a pen and a ledger and a quota, 4,000 miles from the people who paid for it. You are standing in a forest, holding a basket of rubber, and it is not heavy enough. But you are not one person. You are 10 million. And the man who owns your life will never once set foot on this soil, never see your face, never know your name, and never answer for a single thing he did to you. He died in his palace, old, rich, untouched, but the forest remembers, the river remembers, and now so do you. 10 million names that no one ever wrote down. History buried them once. Don't let it bury them again. Subscribe, and we'll keep digging up what the powerful tried to burn. The next grave is already waiting.